Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next MLE International webinar. I'm Carol Benson, founder and co-director of the organization with Irina Iwasaki, who will speak to us in a second. We are a network of scholars and practitioners who are involved in research in multilingual education and also supporting implementers of multilingual education in settings where their languages are starting to be brought into schools or continuing to be brought into schools in multilingual models of education. We're still working on incorporating as a nonprofit organization because we really want to support people on a pro bono basis. So that's coming. And this webinar series started in January, and the thread that sort of goes through all of the webinars is to look at policy and how policy is changing toward the use of more dominant, non-dominant languages in education alongside dominant languages. So I'll hand it over to Irina, and thank you for coming.
Hello, everyone. My name is Irina Iwasaki. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Notre Dame and also a co-director of MLE International. It's a pleasure to have you all. Just a few reminders for our webinar, just housekeeping. Basically, the formats of our webinar have always been 45 minutes presentation by our guest speakers and then 45 minutes questions. From first to the discussant, we will synthesize a little bit, ask the first questions, and then open the floor to all of you. You are welcome to put your questions in the chat box or also speak up when the time comes, when the floor is open. We really hope you can keep the chat box kind of open for questions so we can keep fielding them as they come in. Other than that, we're happy to introduce our guest speakers of this month.
So we'd like to welcome Maria Mercedes Ched Arzadon and Aurelio Agcaoili. I'm not sure about the pronunciation, so you can help me. Sorry. We're very
You're good,
lucky.
Carol.
Thank you.
You're
We're
good.
we're so lucky to have you, and we really appreciate the insights that you're going to give us on language policy in the Philippines, which unfortunately the policy has been a little too exciting during the past few years. So we're looking forward to having you. So I've asked you both to just give us a little more of your background and then get into your presentation. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Okay, so I'll start, Carol. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, MLE International, led by Carol and Irina. Thank you for inviting me to speak our MLE initiatives here in the Philippines. So good evening. It's 8 o'clock here in the Philippines. Naimbag na Rabii. That's my mother tongue. So for a backgrounder, I think maybe some of you are not familiar with the Philippines, but it's a developing country, a young democracy. Our 400 years of colonial rule meant that schooling was largely carried out through colonial languages. We have a population of 114 million and are linguistically diverse with 182 living languages. So since World War II, we had episodes of programs that allowed the use of our languages in school. So we called it vernacular education, then the Lingua Franca project, and then the MTB-MLE in 2009. And now we're calling it with another name like language mapping, or I don't know how it will evolve. Okay, oops, there. Okay, so our history of languages in the Philippines shows that there were leaders who resisted the imposition of colonial languages. These language and cultural champions were policymakers, writers, teacher educators, educational leaders, and teachers. And based on my experience, it is not enough to have supportive policies. policies must be accompanied by agency from various actors to make them work. Given the action of our MLE champions, it is worthwhile to examine the notion of agency, especially in the context of teachers' lives. Okay, let me, something is not working here. Okay, so education scholars like Priestley and Biesta propose a framework of examining teacher agency. So agency is the capacity to act, make choices, and shape educational and social outcomes. This capacity is not inherent or free-floating. It is achieved and enacted within a space for maneuver that is shaped and limited by structural, social, and contextual conditions. So, so like in the Philippines, so if I'm going to apply Biesta and Priestley Biesta's framework, this is how I would analyze our MLE experience. So in the Philippines, our commitment to the EFA, Education for All movement in 2000 was one of the reasons why MLE was accepted and was implemented. But we are also constrained by language attitude, the privileging of English, because English is very important in among our overseas foreign workers. So we are the top country that is exporting laborers all over the world. So its agency is influenced or it's shaped by one's past experiences like training, education, and their aspiration, what kind of learners we want to see, what kind of schools and communities should support our vision for MLE, our vision for languages and heritage. So given these two dimensions, plus the spaces available for maneuver provided by the enabling and disabling conditions, like supportive policies, political priorities, educational discourses. Like our time is known that we privilege learning so much. There's a phenomenon called learnification. That's why we emphasize lifelong learning. And so because of those affordances, we're able to we're able to produce agency that are expressed in various forms. So Kosonen and Benson propose an actor-centered framework that helps us identify the different actors in NMLE. At the top are policymakers who create policies, mandates, provide resources. At the bottom are local educational leaders, teacher, and community members who interpret and implement these policies in their classroom, in their communities. In the middle are the side actors. These are the academics, researchers, NGOs, and institutions. They translate policies into program and practices, provide technical support to top actors. They also have the flexibility to undertake advocacy initiatives like signature campaign, public engage, mass actions, and other mass media, other advocacy using the mass media and the social media. According to Diane Decker, these actors, though few, there are not so many, I can name them, were able to influence policy by amplifying their voices through their research, publication, and social media. Okay, so here are some of the policies that emerged from the MTB-MLE reform in 2009. So there are policies on the use of learning resources. The Indigenous Peoples Education Office was established. What I'm excited about is the policy on teacher hiring. So when a teacher is applying for a position in early grades, kindergarten to grade 3, the applicant should be able to demonstrate during the application process that he can or she can teach using the mother tongue. And then in 2017, the standards for teacher quality includes MTB-MLE capacity. So the teacher should be able to show awareness of diversity, be able to speak local languages. Okay, and then the higher education also got involved in 2017. So teacher education institution began offering courses on mother tongue pedagogy. So that was in 2017. And then in the current teacher education curriculum that is being developed to be formalized this 2026, I found that there are new subjects like theories and approaches in literacy education for learners in the early grades, and children's languages as resource for literacy and learning. So I'm a part of the framing of the curriculum, and I found that mother tongue is used in those subjects. Tom Paredes, who's one of the audience right now, did a study, and he found that ideas about mother tongue were also embedded in various general education and teacher education courses. And there are PhD, MA program on multicultural education, Philippine language studies that was initiated by Dr. Agcaoili. So we hope that this graduate courses will progress and will include some more languages. And here we have there are also initiatives. The impact of MLE was visible beyond the classroom. In some communities, local languages began appearing in public places. So Fert McEachern is here. So he initiated the language policy in Northern Luzon, so that Ilocano will be used in stores, in restaurants, in public places. And we also see the same pattern in Zamboanga and Angeles City and Pangasinan in my hometown. Okay, across regions, the development of mother tongue storybooks became one of the most vibrant aspects of MTB-MLE. In many studies, they mention the presence of big books, or they call it big books, in the research sites that where they did their study. So teachers, local writers, and community members created numerous titles. And later on, these major publishers began publishing storybooks in the mother tongue in various languages. So a colleague estimated that there were at least 2,000 storybook titles that were produced. This number does not include the published, those that are published by commercial publication. I personally witnessed this growth in Bugyas district where I did my study. It's a mountainous area in northern Luzon. There were only 4 big books in 2011 when I first visited the area. By 2018, when I did my ethnography, there were already 300 storybooks in Kankanae, some in Filipino and English. Okay, so since MTB-MLE was institutionalized in 2009, it has faced opposition from various sectors. The turning point came when some lawmakers publicly opposed it. So from this particular transcript is interesting. This is a statement by the Department of Education Undersecretary Densing during the hearing of the bill that will discontinue MTB-MLE. He said, "It is in our opinion that this will fast track the learning capability of our children, especially with the result of the recent PISA assessment and other international assessment. In the words of Vice President and Secretary Sara Duterte, we are lost in the forest." That was her term, that we're focusing on listening too much to the expert advice. It is the position of DepEd and the position of Vice President Secretary Sara Duterte, and again as pronounced by President Bongbong Marcos, for us to return to a bilingual system of instruction. Having 19 modules translated into different mother tongue is cost inefficient for the government. So we see here that they see the MTB-MLE as costly, especially that they have to produce materials in various languages. And we also see that it's the position of the new administration, the vice president and the president. And because of these signals, their colleagues, third party mates in the Congress initiated the bill that discontinued the MTB-MLE. So this is the title of the bill, an act discontinuing the use of the mother tongue of medium of instruction, providing for its optional implementation in monolingual classes. So it doesn't really discontinue the whole program. MTB-MLE can still be implemented provided that these requirements are met, like official orthography, vocabulary, literature, grammar book, and availability of teachers in school who speak and are trained to teach in the mother tongue. And another item that is included in the policy was the inclusion or the introduction of a language mapping policy within 1 year from the effectivity of the act. And it's interesting to see the reaction of teachers after that news was released. One teacher from Abra, this teacher from an indigenous group, he said, "We spent years developing our orthography and mother tongue materials. Why was all our work ignored?" So I was encouraged to see voices from ordinary teachers. In the past, only activists will speak against this policy, but teachers are raising their voices. And here was a response. A petition was filed before the Supreme Court on June 30, 2025. And Dr. Ricardo Nolasco, the founder of our organization, Talaytayan, he and Dr. Agcaoili, he led the group, Tanggol Unang Wika, and they marched to Supreme Court to file a petition. So I had the privilege of joining this event. The petitioners are indigenous peoples, leaders, deaf community, pupils, teachers, linguists, academics, and NGO. So I was so glad to see my students, some of my students join me in marching to the Supreme Court. So these are the main arguments of the petition. So it asserts the right to quality education through the use of the mother tongue, recognition of regional languages, that they should not be sidelined, cultural and linguistic rights, which is central to our identity, and the indigenous people's right. So our education system must respect their languages and knowledge. And the Department of Education and the Commission on Philippine Languages responded 6 months after. They said in their the document that they submitted, their reason out that they argued that the RA 12027 provides that it is meant to address the challenges in effectively implementing the use of the mother tongue as the medium of instruction, namely the shortage of learning materials and qualified teachers. So they are saying that it is not meant to stop it totally, but it is meant to address its shortcomings. And they also wrote, in compliance with the law, the Department of Education has started formulating the language mapping framework. The dialogue enabled adjustment to the policy framework. The activities emphasize alignment between policy provision and classroom realities. So, so it's true because I was there. We were invited in that language mapping workshop. And so because of the language mapping workshop, the series of consultation, Department of Education produced at least 2 DepEd order. One is the policy on the medium of instruction for kindergarten to grade 3. The other one is the guidelines in the use of the language mapping process. So this is the language process workflow that you can find in those 2 policies. That it includes collecting data, interviewing the parents, the child, observing the children in the classroom or at the playground. And then if it is found that the class is monolingual, then they will be organized into a mother tongue class. But if there's diversity, like if the school is located, a particular city, then the LIT, language identification tool, will be used. So the children will go through another series of assessment to determine their L1, their strongest language, and then as a result, they will be placed in in particular class, and they will be given language support in case that they do not speak the medium of instruction. So the policy seeks to correct past practices where languages were assigned to school. In the past, like if you belong to Region 6, then automatically they will assign Bicol as the language in that particular region. But this time, the DepEd Order 20 says that there's no assigned mother tongue for any learner. The medium of instruction must be grounded on the linguistic reality of learners, not in previously implemented labels or default language assessment. Language use decision must be based on current, context-sensitive, and learner-specific data to ensure inclusiveness, equity, and effectiveness in instruction. So schools are commanded to conduct a survey to determine the languages that are actually spoken by the children. So these are the multiple medium of instruction options that will be organized. So there are 4 scenarios. One, if the children speak Filipino or English, so that will be the medium of instruction. If they speak Filipino and English and it's not feasible to set up a regional language class, so that will be scenario B. And then C, there will be first language. The first language of learners can be the primary medium of instruction with gradual introduction to Filipino and English. And scenario D, the indigenous languages as primary medium of instruction with gradual transition to Filipino and English. So this for monolingual classes falling between the threshold of 70 to 99%, the identified dominant language shall be the medium of instruction. So that will be the threshold. If they found that there are 70% of a certain class speak a particular L1, then that L1 will become the medium of instruction. And then it says there, those that are not yet ready to implement the L1 or IP languages as medium of instruction shall indicate strategies in their school improvement plan to build readiness through training and materials development. So, it is schools are mandated to plan to make sure that if they cannot provide the L1 class this year, then they should plan to do it once they have recruited teachers and raised enough materials. And we also find this in the policy: the teacher shall promote inclusive and culturally responsive pedagogy that affirms learners' identities and prevents exclusion. They shall acquire, develop, and contextualize instructional materials suited for the MOI scenario and bridging needs. And they will use mapping data to plan instruction assessment, apply linguistic support. So the presence of linguistic support is something new in the DepEd order. And this will include scaffolding, translanguaging, and use of auxiliary language for learners who do not speak the MOI. In the annex part of the policy, you will find there a long list of linguistic support strategies that the teacher will implement in her class. There's also the provision for the identification of proof of concept. Okay, the best practices. So these schools that are demonstrating, innovations, and they're able to prove that MLE work, they will be identified and documented, and their example will be shared for replication and policy enhancement. Okay, and then the policy also includes partnership with stakeholders. So the school administrator will facilitate validation of language data and consensus building with various groups in the community, with the local government, with the parents, and they will encourage the contribution of stories, rhyme, folklores, and other materials in the local language. The Department of Education Central Office will undertake partnership with research institution, linguists, international organization, and they will commission studies to strengthen evidence-based policy and continuously improve the language identification tool. So this is the series of workshop that has been going on for months in the creation when they gathered leaders from various regions in creating the language mapping process and the language identification tools. So this is one particular tool that we see here where the group from Cordillera identified words, unique words in various languages in the Benguet area. Okay, so these are the major languages. These are the indigenous languages in the area. These words, a drawing or an image is associated for a particular word, and a child is asked to identify that picture. And the teacher will take note what language the child used. Okay, once the language is identified or the strongest language is identified, there will be a process to clarify, to confirm the L1 through the use of the busy picture. So in the first part, the child will just identify the picture, but this time the child will be asked to describe, to narrate a story based on this picture. So if you notice, they're producing, these are just sample pictures generated from AI, but they're going to draw their own pictures when they go back to the region. So the children will be asked to describe the picture, and whatever language that the child will use, based on the grammatical structure, will be identified as the child's L1. So these tools are being field tested. They will come together again next week, okay, to finalize the tool. So right now, the learner is asked to name the pictures, and then they are asked to respond to the busy picture. Okay, so we hope that we can come up with a good, procedure or processes. We can clarify the processes and be able to pass on the language mapping process and the use of language identification tools before the school year starts this July. Okay, so because of because of all these things that are happening in the Department of Education, because of the spaces provided through the language mapping processes. So I'd like to invite my colleagues, the side actors from the regions, to help transform the language mapping processes from a technical requirement into a community-driven process that support MLE. That you will help the schools in your area to strengthen agency, capacity, and to advance the revitalization of non-dominant and indigenous languages. So you can use them for your thesis, for your dissertation. And we should be encouraged by the result of recent studies, because before there were ideas that MLE has failed, but studies from PIDS shows the children who went through MTB-MLE were actually learning more than children who didn't go through MTB-MLE. And then the LIGHT study that was undertaken in 6 countries showed that children who were taught first in their mother tongue scored much higher in English and Filipino reading by grade 4 by 0.7 standard deviation. And then the L1 books matter. Okay, so a higher ratio of mother tongue textbook in grade 3 classroom led to significantly higher reading fluency. And then teachers' belief matter. So when teachers believe in MTB-MLE, then there's improvement. Their students scored better. So it says there, MTB-MLE did not fail because it was wrong. It failed because it was under-supported. So weak funding, weak training, and weak political backing. And so we see here that from stories of teacher like teacher Nemia who use MLE to help all the repeaters in Naga City, move up. And then Principal James Gahi is posting in his Facebook video of students coming from the poorest community in Bukidnon who are able to read using the mother tongue. So we see here that from their experiences and the studies of PIDS that MLE is actually working. And so what I want to propose here is that we create partnership in the region. So we see that the side actors are the key in making MLE work. So I hope we envision this in 2008, that in every region, there will be side actors working with the grassroots, with the schools. So in the past, we only had few, most of us were in Manila. But now I see in our past conference at Romblon that we have groups of young advocates, young what they call this, academics, okay, working in various regions. So I hope that we will form this community, this partnership with schools so that we can strengthen the implementation of MLE. Unlike in other countries where they had only, maybe less than 100 of MLE schools, our experience in the Philippines is different. It's a massive, we've been implementing this in all 40,000 plus schools. Therefore, we need support from the side actors in various places. So these are possible research and extension directions or research topics that you can work on based on the language mapping policy that we have introduced. So it's easy for you, for those of you in the regions, to get in touch with the schools. You've met the teachers there in your past research and in past MLE training. So I hope that you will decide to support MLE as we implement it again, okay, through the language mapping process. So let me end with what our friend Frank Peñones wrote in our group chat the day we received the sad news that MTB-MLE is being discontinued. So we were all so sad, but he wrote, let's just remember an old ninja rule. We may have lost today, but we are given tomorrow to fight again and win. So I hope that that we will do all that. We will all be ninjas, and we will continue to fight for MLE, for our mother tongues, and for our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ted. And we want to go right to Dr. Aurelio has prepared a video for us, but he is here for the discussion. So we want to go right into that video, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks so much.
I'm here.
Okay.
Can everyone just see? Is it?
Yes,
showing?
yes.
Okay, great.
Good. And you're going to share.
Good day, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like first to thank Dr. Carol Benson and Dr. Irina Iwasaki, both of the MLE International. I also would like to thank Dr. Chad Arzadon of the University of the Philippines, Diliman College of Education, for thinking that I could contribute to this seminar on creating spaces for the MTB-MLE in the Philippines in a look on its 15 years as policy practice and contestation. But I'd like also to be specific that I'll be bringing in the experience of the NAKEM Conferences in this group as a consortium in the pursuit of these aims of MLE or MTB-MLE as called in the Philippines. NAKEM is a consortium of 6 independent NAKEM groups all over the world. And the original was in Honolulu, and I'll go back to that kind of a history later on. But let me begin by saying that before there was a law, there was a wrong. A long, documented, and entirely deliberate wrong It is the exclusion of Filipino citizens from education in their own languages. Their minds shaped in tongues not their own, their citizenship measured by fluency in Filipino and English. The two languages the nation had decided, for reasons that everything had to do with power and nothing to do with learning, were the only ones that counted. 184 ethno-linguistic communities, two languages that mattered, your Filipino and your English. The arithmetic of that exclusion is not an accident of history. It is a policy, one that Constantino identified decades ago as exclusion that is not accident. It is not an accident of history. It is policy. And for decades, it had a name no one in power wanted to say out loud. It is injustice. Let me begin with a question the nation state has not answered and may no longer be asking. The question is this: do we believe that a child has the right to learn in the language they already know, in the language their family speaks, in the language that holds the name for the world? Because if the answer is yes, and Republic Act 10533 said it was, then everything that has happened since, the wavering, the underfunding, the institutional indifference, the quiet abandonment of what the law promised, is not a policy failure. It is a betrayal. NAKEM has been working against this betrayal since before the law existed. This talk is an accounting of that work and a demand that the question be answered again, this time with the courage the answer requires. Creating spaces for the MTB-MLE in the Philippines. I talked of this long before, and I'll tell you the story of NAKEM so that I can bring in the argument that this MLE should be the work of every one of us. At the centennial of the coming of the Ilocanos to work in the plantations of Hawaii in 2006, we had this opportunity to put together something that could respond to the issues of the diasporic Ilocano communities and other communities from the Philippines in the state of Hawaii. There is in these communities what you would call this idea of diasporic struggle, as there were not enough spaces for them to honor who they are or to celebrate who they are. And therefore, I would say that this really are in keeping with this ideal, this pursuit that we should have language justice, cultural democracy, and liberatory education. Meaning to say, those problems, these issues that you have in the Philippines are the same issues of Filipinos in these diasporic and exilic communities elsewhere. We found it at that 100th year of the coming of the Ilocano in 1906, these NAKEM Conferences in 2006. NAKEM was originally this idea of this critical and creative and committed consciousness of the Ilocanos. But eventually, we thought that what happens to the Ilocano people is happening also to other people. And so NAKEM now became an acronym to mean the National Alliance for Knowledge, Empowerment, and Meaning. We thought that this would be where we could go in answering the difficult question that I raised in the beginning. Now, NAKEM, as I said, stood for these three things, these three what you would call pursuits, goals, values, even what you would call the sense of vision and commitment, and even mission. Language justice that Every person has the right to be educated in their own language without shame, exclusion, or penalty. Cultural democracy is understood to mean no culture, no tradition, no way of knowing is inherently superior. All must have space in education and in public and collective life. Liberatory education, by that we mean that education that does not free the learner from the structures of domination and subjugation and hegemony is not education. It is reproduction. It is dependency. It is mimicry. In 2007, NAKEM, as founded in Honolulu, came home. We founded the first ever NAKEM Conferences Philippines in 2007 at the State University, the Mariano Marcos State University. That is the first of the NAKEM away from the United States. And with that, we continue to pursue the struggle that what we found in the Pacific, and brought this idea, this concept that these things that really are happening in the Pacific area are the very things that really are happening as well in the Philippines and elsewhere. So this really had become some kind of a commitment, not only for the diasporic and exilic peoples in the US, but also for the people in the Philippines who have been deprived of their right to their languages and cultures and the right to free education. That really matters, and because that matters, because they are in fact here given the chance to understand what liberty and freedom really are all about. Now, we talked about these things a while ago. We have 184 ethno-linguistic communities that really are left to fend for themselves in understanding who they are, other people, the communities, and the world, and their own experiences in the language that they know best, which in fact is their own first language, their first words. We call us the mother language. We know for a fact that only 2 languages, as we have mentioned, have been given this right to exist with this freedom to dominate and to subjugate and to announce hegemony as something normal and natural. There is therefore the wrong that needed righting. This is what we call this denial of education of citizens in their own languages. And this has come about for generations and generations. It is the colonial curricula reproduced, and this curricula believes and assumes that there is something neutral and universal in every curriculum that we, in fact, are what you would call the curricula for our learners who are deprived of their own languages. What happens, therefore, is that citizenship has been reduced to fluency in these 2 imposed languages, and that therefore the nation state is only performing freedom, while it is also at the same time enforcing exclusion, and that exclusion is systemic as well as systematic. Now, we have this promise to right the wrong thing, and we thought this is going to be from what we will call this glorious aim of Republic Act 10523. That, in fact, is the promise. And this law happened, enacted, 7 years after NAKEM was founded in 2006 in Honolulu, in the place of indentured Ilocano laborers of the plantation. It is, to me, a legislative template for righting a long and documented wrong. There is excitement in this, and this excitement is genuine, it's broad, and it is earned. Advocacy groups and nonprofit organization, teachers and educationists, students, cultural workers, And of course, NAKEM came to acknowledge that there is really this promise of RA 10533. And we worked. We started to work. Now, what did MTB-MLE promise? It promised this, and we are going to say, where has this promise gone for the last 15 years? Learning begins in the language the child already knows. That's what it was. Mother tongue is the bridge, not the barrier. Knowledge and identity are not opposites. And the state acknowledges linguistic diversity as a societal and collective resource. That's the promise. 4 of these beautiful promises. Now, what happened when we got this excitement? We conducted for the last 15 years workshops, teacher trainings, conferences, language seminars. And in the case of NAKEM, starting 2006, we have been, in fact, in almost all the themes and topics of this international conference we were holding every year. Those were all anchored on the MLE and the 3 other tripod of what you would call the vision and mission of NAKEM Conferences as a consortium now, as the National Alliance for Knowledge, Empowerment, and Meaning. So we did this, and we keep on doing this. Now, what was the role of NAKEM in all this? This excitement, this new way of perhaps finally redeeming ourselves from this idea that this peripheralized people, by the power of the state, need not be peripheralized any longer. NAKEM did not become simply observers. They did not become simply bystanders, but instead they were co-builders. It prepared, it offered intellectual foundation, and it brought together a framework which we call as language justice as democratic right, not pedagogical convenience. It is a community bridge linking the diasporic Ilocano communities in Davao with teachers, scholars, and advocates in the Philippines. So now we have what you would call this many communities gathered together to really pursue this aim of MLE anchored on language justice, cultural democracy, and emancipatory education. This institutional memory, 15 years of conferences, and then more publications and networks carried the argument forward even when this policy, this RA 10533, was stalled. It became an accountability partner. It did not waver in its commitment to the first language, the first words of people and citizens in an otherwise diverse country like the Philippines. Now, 15 years, this is what we have got. And in 2006, we are giving you an illustration of the story of NAKEM. We are ahead of the RA 10533 because we knew that something was not right for so many generations of education, of the education of our learners in our public schools, in our classrooms. NAKEM remains committed to the truth of multilingual education. It did not waver at all. Now, what happened was, despite the enactment of this law, cracks began to appear. There was this implementation without conviction, the school ban on Ilocano and possibly other languages. Political will evaporated, and the nation-state loses its bearings. Now we go. Teachers were trained but not supported. Materials were promised but underfunded. School banned students from using Ilocano within its walls. NAKEM fought back. And the school banning in Ilocano NAKEM provided what they call the main support for calling for the deputation of this president of the school that banned the students speaking Ilocano inside the school that is supposed to be an English-speaking school. The law was on the students' side as we fought. The institution was not. Now, administrations changed, the urgency faded, and MLE became policy on paper rather than practice in the classroom, and the sense of divide, belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity simply disappeared. Now, I walk with you with this idea of this experience about the school that banned Ilocano. Because, we talked about this one. There are only two languages valued in the Philippine classroom, Tagalog, Filipino, and English. And so you don't use this in the school setting, you are going to be banned. Well, that was not the language used by that school. Through its lawyers, they were asked to leave the school. So they were not expelled, but they simply were, quote unquote, asked to leave the school because they were speaking Ilocano. I said, NAKEM stood with the students, and we, in fact, initiated an online petition to call for the deportation of the leader of that school if he would not issue a public apology. So we talk about languages as justice as not a scholarly argument, or it's not only a scholarly argument, it is a lived experience. It is lived by our own people, and this actually is, in fact, basic that we have to give. We have to fight for justice, and in justice in all counts, in all aspects, including, of course, justice in language. Now, what has been lost? We lost this idea of belonging, of inclusion, of this celebration of difference within sameness and standing on equal footing. The buy that we talk about, we lost this because what happened is what you would call now this imposition of dominance, normalization of hegemony, this normalization of subjugation, even despite the fact that we have RA 10533. NAKEM remains committed to the truths of multilingual education. It is what it is. NAKEM talks about critical and creative consciousness, and it talks about language justice, cultural democracy, and liberatory education. There's nothing else except those three things, anchored on this idea that multilingual education is the truth. We cannot deny what we call the being of people is speaking another language that is not your language. Now, we ask, where is MTB-MLE now after 15 years? NAKEM now has been working on this one for 21 years. We compare, MLE is in there in our collective consciousness for the last 15 years only. I would say MTB-MLE, as understood in the Philippines, is in the books, remains a law. But it is under pressure because the implementation has been inconsistent. Resources have been uneven. Political support has weakened. In fact, so many of our supposedly enlightened legislators and even educationists do not support this MLE. It is contested as well. Some institutions resisted. In fact, I know one school, even in the Ilocos, that has not honored its mandate to teach Ilocano, but teach only this Tagalog, Filipino, and English. And that school is a school of the faith. It teaches about God, the divinity, and the truth of what they would call inculturation in Christianity and in the life of people in this, let's say, Ilocano-speaking community. Think about that. But this is what I say. MLE or MTB-MLE is alive in our communities. The question, therefore, now is not whether MTB-MLE or MLE was the right direction. The question is whether those in power still believe it was. Please allow me to repeat what the question is. That question that we need to ask again and again in order to assess what happened to the last 15 years of this MLE in the Philippines and elsewhere, at least in the case of the Filipinos in the US. Well, we still have that kind of a connection between what is happening in the Philippines and also in the US. I repeat, the question is whether those in power still believe it was the right direction. What are the stakes? Every year without MTB-MLE is another child learning to think in a language they do not fully own. And therefore we can say do not fully understand. Every school, number two, that bans a language is a school that teaches children their identity is an obstacle. Every school. Every policy, number three, is a reversal. Every policy reversal is a message to 184 communities that their languages are still peripheral. They are not necessary in community building. They are not necessary in the nation state narrative and in the life of the nation. That the languages do not count. And number four, and every community that refuses to give up is a proof that this fight, this struggle for MLE matters. And it matters because it provides the foundation of being of each of these linguistic communities that really are not part of what you call the language communities that really are approved or valued by the nation or the nation state. Now, I'd like to say that freedom is an unfinished business. And the work, therefore, of righting this wrong thing that I talked about in the beginning does not end with the law. Even if you have a law and you don't do nothing with it, you are not going to be serious with it. It's still unfinished. It ends when every child, meaning to say, this work ends when every child in the Philippines learns in a language they already know, in a classroom that does not ask them to leave themselves at the door. This act of leaving themselves at the door, this is what we are doing as a kind of our business in our educational system. If you are a Maranao, you say, hey, leave yourself at the door if you are Maranao, because this time around, you are going to become now Filipino, Tagalog, an English-speaking person. Your being is in fact mediated by these two languages. But NAKEM has not stopped. The struggle for language justice, for MLE, for cultural democracy, and for emancipatory education continues. In conclusion, let us call this as what it is. I call this an indictment and the refusal. When a nation state passes a law acknowledging the right of its children to learn in their own languages, and then underfunds it, ignores it, allows institutions to punish children for speaking the very tongues the law was meant to protect. This is not a policy failure. This is not a policy failure. Policy failures are accidents. This is a choice. It is the same choice that has been made in one form or another since the first colonial schoolmaster stood before a classroom of Filipino children who said, speak English, and the letter A is now going to be apple. A is for apple. And so I want to end where this always should have begun, with a child. Not an abstraction, not a demographic. It is a specific child. That child in a specific classroom in one of the 184 language communities this nation has spent generations telling that the way of speaking is not a way of knowing. That child is sitting in a classroom right now. The lesson is being delivered in a language that is not yet fully heard. She is not failing, that child. She is translating simultaneously and visibly, doing the exhausting cognitive labor that Cummins has spent decades documenting. The labor that never appears in assessments because assessments are not designed to see it. She is learning, among other things, that child, that the institution charged with her development has decided by the structure of its instruction that she must earn her place in knowledge by abandoning the language in which she first understood herself, others, the world, and the community. But here is what the nation state has consistently failed to understand about the people who keep fighting for that child. They are not fighting out of sentiment. They are fighting out of evidence, decades of it, from Cummins to Thomas and Collier to Walker and Decker, and out of a moral clarity that no amount of administrative indifference has managed to erode. The child is still in that classroom. The fight is still necessary, and the fighters, the teachers, the cultural workers, the community organizers, the NAKEM members who carry this work across oceans and decades, are still here. Still naming what is being done, is still refusing to let the nation state forget what it promised, is still insisting and saying that treating linguistic rights not as a courtesy to be extended by the powerful, but as a condition of full humanity. Non-negotiable, not yet achieved, and worth every act of resistance it takes to secure. And on this note, therefore, I would like to say, mahalo nui loa. Thank you for this sharing. And I think that Dr. Chen and I will be ready to be quizzed after this.
Thank you so much for those final words, Dr. Aurelio. I will, it was really profound, and I think the words that you left us will resonate with all of us as we carry on with our discussion section. I will do my best to synthesize a little bit what you've both talked about. And also, Carol and I have 2 questions to begin, and we'll open the floor to our participants. Everyone, please feel free to write your questions in the chat box. And when your time comes, we will leave the floor to you. You can either, if you cannot speak, you can leave your question in the chat. And if you'd like to react live, we will leave you can raise your hand and we will let you ask the questions. So thank you so much, Ched and Aurelio, for both a very insightful and thought-provoking presentation. I think since the partial policy reversal in 2024, I think a lot of eyes were turned towards the Philippines in terms of what is actually happening. Is this, the Philippines being sort of the leader country in the Asia Pacific region in MTB-MLE? I think a lot of the community members here, both internationally and nationally, locally, were really curious to know how things were going. And I both appreciated your presentation in terms of the focus on agency. I think this is really, sometimes policy reversals are discouraging, but history has also shown that people taking action, people organizing, people doing something also leads to certain outcomes, and we can also drive change we can drive change. And so I really appreciated that both of you shared the people that were there before us who were champions. And this is not a new topic that we've been dealing with, but it's been years that people have protested, contested, requested for the use of students' first language in education. So really, this is something that I wanted to emphasize. And it was also really nice to see that I think when we look through things through the lens of agency, both in your own organizations, you've also shown that things are still happening. It's not because there is because the aid world has shifted, because the policy reversal has happened, that things don't continue to happen. And I think highlighting the work that is continuously being done by the people on the field and by people like you is really something that we need to recognize and realize that this is an ongoing effort and work. So this is something that I really took out of both of your presentations. Now, now I have a question, if I may, related to basically now a lot of us are here, have worked as side actors or have been working with the grassroots organizations. Some of us are scholars, researchers, and my first question is kind of related to the role of research. I think you've both touched upon it, but so as you both know, and just to share a little bit, I was also on the light studies, supporting the light studies for the political prioritization of L1-based MLE, the question related to the political prioritization of MTB-MLE in different countries. And for the case of Philippines, and this is just my own hunch, we haven't really found like the proof to really say this was it, but I just noticed that there were substantial numbers of critical studies, even coming from the MLE community related to the implementation of MTB-MLE. And we've seen in the proceedings of the Congress that some senators or some people have utilized that as a way to say, well, you are saying this, so of course it's not working. And therefore we proposed this reversal. And I just thought, and then I think you mentioned, you had a few slides about that. If you had any words for us as researchers on what we should be focusing on to support MTB-MLE. We all know that it works. Evidence has shown that students in many multiple contexts, that students fare better in their L1 and in the dominant language as well if they have their L1. And so the evidence is there. So I wonder, what do you think what the role of researchers would be at this state to support MTB-MLE? Yeah, so that's my question. And Carol, would you like to ask yours, or I'll let you answer this first. Thank you.
Okay. The role of researchers. Yeah, I'm reading at the questions here, the chat box. There's so many. It's quite daunting. I think you know, the elite, the political elite in the Philippines have been promoting ideas, discourses about languages. It's expensive to implement it. You know, it's better. Children will be better. You know, they'll be better off if they learn English, etc. All these ideas have been normalized. I think one role of researchers is to deconstruct, maybe to see the implicit meanings, and maybe provide ways to offer alternative ideas. For example, you know, the very common idea is you have to learn English to be globally competitive. But what kind of jobs are being offered to our children? You know, low-level, low-paying jobs, domestic workers, low-paid laborers. So they're globally competitive only within that area. But if we develop critical thinking, if they learn to reason out, like the maybe Japanese, like you, and Korean, who use their languages to study the world, then they will have better chances, and that they will not be relegated to, you know, this kind of limitations, or less opportunities in the world out there. So I think that's one thing that researchers can do. They can, you know, and they can also see what's happening at the ground, because then the tendency of some people is to still see languages as bounded. But children are using several, I mean, of course, they have one structure, grammatical structure, but they are also translanguaging a lot. And so one mistake that we had before was to translate materials using archaic languages. I think you found that in the studies. And so maybe one way is to determine what's the best way, you know, what's the best way to learn, what, how can we, when's the best time to use the language of the poets, and then, you know, when can we move towards that, or how can we start, you know, maybe start with the child's language. Maybe if they're translanguaging, then we start with that, but eventually we have to help them also appreciate, you know, the classics or the poetry that was written in their languages. So that's my answer. Maybe Manong Aurel can give more the role of research in MTB-MLE.
Well, I would say that the research will give us more evidence that Carol was mentioning a while ago, right? Okay, so meaning to say, it really is gonna be giving us more proof that we really are on the right side of history and in education, in real substantive education. That's what it is. So, for example, in the case of NAKEM, I have listened to presenters talking about, let's say, concepts of mathematics in the indigenous languages of the people being presented at these conferences, for example, in the sciences. So we should have those. In fact, now we are working on what we call now simply as STEM, and we are gathering this researches from our participants in these NAKEM conferences. So we're talking about the STEM. Okay, we are going to provide you with this proof.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
really
The proof, yes.
useful. Could
But
I, I'm going to try to combine a few of the questions that I see in the chat into a larger question that I also had, and that is, um, we've been some of us have thought of this as a policy failure, but I really like the way that you've both talked about this, and it looks like um, it's more of a political choice and that the support of the many members of the community is still there. It's not going away. So I'm wondering if you think about this policy issue as an opportunity to address some of the logistical problems that um, were encountered. It looks to me like language mapping and the activities that you're talking about are all really good ways to address not only the actual issues, but also public opinion. So I'm wondering if you can each talk about that.
Yeah. Well, when you think of success in MTB-MLE, it's something that you can achieve maybe in the next 50 years. I mean, if you believe that you can accomplish it in 2 years, then you say it has failed. But if you want strong MLE, enough materials, trained teachers, parents, and family members who value their languages, if that's the kind of your vision of communities and school, then it will take beyond your lifetime. And at first, I had the illusion that we can fulfill it as long as we work harder. But as later on, I realized that I just have to do what I can do, work slowly. Like right now, I see when in that last conference that I attended in Romblon, as I mentioned earlier, I was so thrilled to see young advocates, young scholars. Okay, many of them are here and they're eager to do advocacy and training in their own regions. So and it's funny because during the hearing at the Senate, we were there and we thought that they were just trying to console us, saying, "Oh, we are addressing the loopholes of MLE through this law." And I thought, we didn't believe them. But later on, uh, when it was DepEd, not the senators or the congressman, because there are some I know some people in DepEd who are really staunch advocates of MLE. And I saw them making the most of the available spaces. They made sure that the language mapping processes would provide the foundation or the support for to address the weaknesses, to address, the loopholes that we had. But and I also met for the first time strong advocates from various languages because especially from the Visayas and some from Mindanao also during the workshop. And some would say, "Oh, we would implement it no matter what." And I thought I was already very keen about MLE, but they were even more passionate about it. So that was encouraging. So I think we are growing. It's like what a mustard seed growing slowly. But as I said, it will take many years.
Would you like me to add something, Carol?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I've been going around since I came to the country, talking things about MLE and the curriculum and so on down the line. In fact, tomorrow I'll be in Davao. That's gonna be my 8th talk in 10 days. No, in 9 days. No, I am gonna give you an anecdote. I delivered a talk on these things at the Mariano Marcos State University. One thing came out was that a student doing sociology told the public that they were taught in the sociology degree that they are pursuing Chinese in what was the other language? There's another language. It's not Ilocano. In when they in fact the student really was interested in understanding the reproductive problem associated with the sociology of the people in one particular Ilocano place. So look at that kind of a problem that we have, and it's real in the Philippines. And I had also this kind of a, how would I call it? And I think that Dr. Paredes is here. We had a conference in his school in Agusan del Sur, and I attended one presentation about what they're doing to improve the Bachelor of Arts in English language. You know what they were teaching in Agusan del Sur, and one of the indigenous languages there was the Manovo language. They were instead teaching, what is it? They were teaching Nippon Japanese in the Bachelor of Arts in English. Now, why am I saying these anecdotes? We are saying this because while it is true that there are so many people who understand what MLE is all about, there are also equally other people who do not understand what we need to do to make us understand what we need to do. This is tragic. And the tragedy is really showing us this contradiction that we are. We want to do something good. Some other people do not understand what this something good that we are doing is all about, and they are in fact doing the reverse. How can you even teach Japanese in a Manovo-speaking people trying to understand who they are, but yet also at the same time pursuing a degree in English? I mean, and the other example that I had, I just had that one today. I mean, the only way out is for you to really cry right now, or maybe control the tear and say, hey, let's keep firing. So it's all over the place. I went to another state university in Naga, and I talked there to about the same thing that we are concerned about. It's the same story all over again. The same story. And so the question, I think, Carol and Irina and everyone else in this gathering, when do we ever learn as a people? When do we ever learn to respect? We talk about, for example, this problem of logistics and 184 people given the right to be themselves. I am insisting language is people. You don't follow that line, that logic, we are lost. It's not simply only education. It's not only a matter of logistics. There is so much corruption in the country that they have the logistics for corruption and not for education, of people who can think for themselves and people who need to be educated in civics and citizenship. That is not an argument.
Yeah.
It's not.
Those are
It cannot be.
larger questions, aren't they? I'm trying to, I would love to have the questioners speak, but there are so many questions that we're trying to summarize them a little bit. There are a few questions about language mapping and how it works. And maybe I could just make that bigger by saying, how do you see language mapping as contributing to the policy implementation? And a couple of people raised questions about assessment, which I think are really relevant in this case. So we're looking for solutions or contributions, and we're near the end, but we can continue if you have some good answers for us. So anything you'd like to say about language mapping and maybe where people can get more information about the particulars of it?
Yeah.
And then also anything you'd like to say about assessment of learners? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you can easily download the DepEd Order 20 Series 2025 and DepEd Order 35 Series 2025. So these are long documents, but they will give you the details. And there's another one on the administration of the language identification tool. I just highlighted the key tools that we use, like the series of pictures and the busy pictures. But if you look at the whole document, the whole process, the first step is talking to the parents, interviewing the parents, talking to the child, and observing the child in their natural habitat, their natural environment. And then you apply the language identification tool in the case that there are many languages spoken in the area. So there's triangulation there. It's not just using one tool and that's enough. Okay, so we want to make sure, even if if we want to make sure that the child will be be able to answer question, carry on a conversation in the most comfortable language, in their mother tongue, in their strongest language, in their L1. So that's my answer to one question that was placed here. And there's I noticed among the participants that there's a strong advocacy for indigenous languages. So for the past 15 years, so much work has been done in developing the orthography, maybe about at least 50 indigenous languages. So, this RA 12027 is quite careful because we have a strong IP Rights Act. And so they're not putting so much restriction when it comes to the use of indigenous languages. But again, to make this happen, because the language mapping or the language identification, the use of a language identification tool is just the first step. The next step is organizing them into classes. So there are 4 classes, 4 types, and you have to provide language support for children who are not placed in their mother tongue class. And so, it's not just mapping them out, but providing the MLE or multilingual education support, teaching them to read and write in their mother tongue. But the policy is still hazy, up to what grade, So I hope that in the next document that we are writing, it will give more clarity to answer those questions. There are still so many questions actually. So that's my answer. About assessment, I don't know what you meant by assessment. Is it
referring to whether or not children's own languages are being used in assessment still, and that's a bigger question for all of MLE.
Yeah, right. Of course, for classroom assessment, their language will be used, but for like CPLM started using Filipino for the first time. It's been using English for since started, and there are some improvement in the results when Filipino was used, especially among the children in BARM. That's the poorest region in the Philippines. In the English, using English, they were, their score was almost 0, the lowest rung. But when Filipino was used, their score improved a bit. And I appreciate. Closer. Yeah, sorry. I appreciate UNICEF for advocating to include more languages in CPLM, because there's one question here about 90% of children cannot read. Well, because I think Sheldon asked that question because they're using the data from CPLM, the 2019 CPLM. Therefore, 90% of children are not able to meet the passing mark. But English was used in the test. And so when they're announcing that 90% cannot read, they are not qualifying that that test was done in English. So I hope that, it's the test is not really valid.
Maybe we're right at our ending time, but we could just go on a couple more minutes. I'm thinking that a good question that has come up also is is what advice would you give to young and new professionals, maybe researchers, but also new advocates to MLE, if there are any lessons learned from the past? And I think that's a good question to both of you.
Yeah, be ready to cry a lot. You'll be crying a lot. Be ready to, there will be differences even among your ranks. So it will be difficult. That's why you have to look, you have to have a long-term vision. You should live for something beyond yourself, beyond your own promotion and advancement. So I think that's one thing that I can say based on my 15 years experience. I appreciate support. Manong Aurelio has been there through thick and thin, he's been unwavering even in times that maybe he didn't agree with what I was doing, because it's difficult working with Dep Ed. So I appreciate the support. So having a support group, being a part of a community of advocates will help you a lot.
I would like to say to that, what I do, Carol, and colleagues here in this gathering, I do as much as I can to infect people, younger people. Like I'm 127 years old, so I need people to replace me. And there's one in this gathering, and the name is Leonardo Tejano, who is now heading really an avant-garde initiative to really keep on pushing for really a wider implementation in his University of, let's say, Ilocano. And what I did also in my recent work in Ilocos is I have been able to put together here a new group of people, really young people in the university, to go back to their first language, what I call now as the first word. And we established already a formal group, and then the formal group is called this Tidagami. It's actually an acronym to mean this is our land, and therefore we have to have our own language. And these are our college students, Professor Leo Tajano, and it's getting bigger now and bigger, even right after something like this last 12 hours of me meeting with these students. And so I think that when we are able to touch the soul, the heart, the body, and the spirit of our younger people, we have to admit that we will not be able to stay here forever the way Dr. Chen was always telling us. We can probably maybe wait for the next 50 years to really see the fruit of what we are doing so far. But at least if we are able to have these younger people to eventually say catch, I think that's the good word, the catch, this vision of finally respecting each other. I'm really big on this one, respecting each other, and part of that respect is to respect the home of our being, and that's language. The home of our bodies, and that's language. The home of our mind and spirit, and that's language. I want all these people who are powerful to eventually, finally see that. And I think that these young people will lead us to this.
Wonderful. That's a great note to end on. I'm very sorry. We love to hear the voices of people who have the questions, and I'm very sorry that we weren't able to do that today. But I hope you'll all listen to the recording of this conference and come back to all of us with questions or comments. We really appreciate it. I just want to share that we have another presentation coming up next month. Am I sharing it correctly? And with colleagues from Mozambique to talk about the policy situation there. It's going to be on April 15th. So thank you again to Dr. Ched and Dr. Aurelio for your wonderful presentation. Thank you all for coming. And Irina, any last words?
So thank you, really. Thank you so much for for all the wisdom and all the insights. So really appreciate everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
Maraming salamat. Take care, everyone.
Maraming salam.
Salamat. Thank you.
Salamat.
Thank you, Carol.
Salamat,
Thank you,
Arya.
Irina.